Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the David Mathas podcast. I'm your host, David Mathas, and today I've got my friend and fellow USF almost alum, Tony Montgomery. We were just talking off, before we started recording here that he just finished his last final for the semester. He's got one more semester left before heading off for his PhD. And there's a few schools in consideration for that, in contention for him. All of them sound amazing. I think whichever one you end up going to is going to be, first of all, very lucky to have you. You bring a lot of expertise, you bring a lot of passion and stuff, and you're just going to have a great PhD program no matter where you choose. So I appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate you having me, man, and thanks for the kind words. One semester left. I feel very fraudulent until I get that semester under my belt. It's like one class and independent study, so it's going to be the easiest semester I've had in a long time.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to it. It's kind of like easing into things before you dive headfirst into engulfing yourself in a PhD program that's going to be 40 to 60 hours a week. So it's nice to have that break.
Oh, absolutely. You're going to need it. I didn't realize you were doing the full 2-year master program, because when I went through, I did the accelerated 1.5 years. So like at this time in 2019, like I took my last final, I was done. Right. I didn't have that semester where I only had one class and then an independent study. Like I had everything jammed into that last semester, and there's pros and cons to both. But, I think that the way you're doing it is smart, because I think it'd be very hard if you had like a whole semester, basically a whole, 8 months off before you started your PhD program, wherever you end up deciding to go to. I think for me, that would be tough. I know, we're both military men. I know taking so much time off of school and coming back was hard enough. So after you kind of get out of that rhythm of school and studying and classes and research and all that, and you get that break, it might be a little tough to go, balls deep into a 60-hour-a-week PhD program.
Yeah, man, definitely. That's one of the things I had to do when getting back into school. Is like I just took a semester of undergrad credits just to make sure, like mentally and physically, I still wanted to go through with it. And then when I did, and then I applied to USF and came down here for school, and it's been smooth sailing since then, man. I've really enjoyed the program, and it's put out a lot of great people like yourself and Luke and some of the other guys that I met last time I came down here. So it's a fun program.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I remember it was, it was 2018 when you came, or early 2019 when you came down.
Yeah.
That's when the first time, you and I met. We had that small little group get together with Dr. Campbell, and kind of told you all the good things and very few little bad things about it. And it had nothing to do with the program. It was just be ready to do a lot of research, be ready to do what you were all on board with. That's what you wanted and everything. So how have you found your time at USF?
It's been fun, man. It's a little bittersweet, right? Because you don't get the full experience due to COVID, right? The best thing about grad programs is the interaction with the professors and doing the research and stuff. And that's been very much up and down roller coaster ride due to COVID, online school and stuff like that. So tried to make the best of it. I was in Dr. Campbell's lab for the first 2 semesters, and then didn't really find my foot in there. So I moved over to Dr. Buckner and working with his lab. And right now, me and him and Blake are doing some case series, and we're really excited about that. Just working on trying to get muscle size and isometric strength of top 10 Olympians, and just kind of the elite of the elite, and seeing how they measure up to, he already did this research on Ray Williams, and kind of having a big case series of like 10 or 12 elite level bodybuilders and powerlifters, and seeing how they stack up together and where their muscle is compared to like an average person. So that's been really fun. Love Dr. Buckner and the way he challenges you and challenges your thought process. And Dr. Campbell has a very fun way of introducing nutrition and the research and making it digestible, which is really important because it's so convoluted throughout social media, people trying to make it as confusing as possible. So he simplifies it, and it's been a great experience working with those 2 guys.
Yeah, for those of you guys who don't know, I'm sure a lot of you guys probably know Dr. Bill Campbell. He's a very prominent researcher and educator in the industry, but Dr. Sam Buckner, young, up and coming, great professor, great researcher, doing a lot of stuff with the USF Muscle Lab. His first semester there was my first semester there.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
We came into the program together. I mean, obviously he was teaching and I was learning, but, we came into the program together and, struck up a really good friendship that still continues to this day. And he's just you talked about him challenging you, challenging the way you think. And that was the thing that I appreciated about him the most. And unfortunately, with COVID, you didn't get as much of his in-class experience as my class did.
Right.
It was out well before COVID. But one of the things that I really respected most about him and how he conducted his classes was, he had a blueprint going into class, like what we wanted to talk about, the topics, stuff like that. And he had PowerPoints, but we got into a lot of discussions and we had a wonderful class. I mean, we had, Luke Miller, Sarah Ford, all these people, a lot of people were in my class and everything. And we all had different areas of specialty, I guess, or different focuses. We had some powerlifters, we had a lot of female bikini competitors, we had bodybuilders, we had endurance people. So it was a really cool interaction during those discussions, because most of the class, we'd read a paper and then we would just go off and talk about that. And we learned so much more through those conversations and those discussions than just looking at any PowerPoint that you could ever look at. So I really appreciated that, how he ran his classes and everything like that. And I'm excited to see what kind of research you guys are doing with those Olympians. I mean, that's fascinating. I think there's so much research on just like, I want to call them the average everyday individual, right? But that doesn't translate over to high performing professional Olympian athletes. They are just a different beast. So just as a nerd, I'm excited to see what you guys come up with about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also a great way of introducing yourself as a researcher to those type of people, right? It's like an easy barrier of entrance of like, hey, we're just going to check out your muscle size. We're going to do an isometric bicep curl. And then they're like, oh, if they really enjoy that experience, maybe we can do some more research with them. Maybe we can start doing the research on the high level individuals, which would be amazing, right?
Yeah. So a lot of people are probably like, well, why wouldn't we have that information now? Right. Well, if any of you guys have been around high performing professional people, they don't want their stuff messed with. Like they don't want to follow somebody else's program. They want to follow their coach's program. They don't want to be tested. Like it's a lot different of an animal. And that's why, I think that the way that Tony's introducing it here is like, you get them kind of interested. You just do one little thing, right? And you do another thing. And then you explain to these professional athletes how this testing is not only going to help them, but help their sport and their, athletes further down the road. And people want to be a part of that stuff. But research is not quite as easy as like, hey, let's just do a study, right? There's a lot that goes into it. Funding, approvals, you got to get the subjects, you got to get them to be consistent and stay
adherence.
In the study. Adherence. So there's a lot. I'm sure you get it all the time. Like, oh, is there a study that says blah, blah, blah? Well, it's not really a topic that someone's willing to put money into. So no, there's not going to be a topic and a research study on every little thing that has to do with nutrition and training and stuff. But I think what you guys are doing there at the USF Muscle Lab is definitely going to be game changing if it can be seen through, to the end. So
yeah, we're excited, man. And yeah, if we were like Russia, we'd be able to do all these cool research where they put sports at such a high pedestal, but that's not going to shift the needle. Cancer research, stuff that's like actually important to help and cure people, that's going to get the funding, and rightfully so, right? But it's cool to play around with it and research some of the elite performers and stuff.
In the grand scheme of things, what we do with fitness and training and nutrition and all that, it's not earth-shattering stuff. Like it's not the most important stuff. I mean, it may be to our small community that thinks it is the world, right? But in reality, I mean, I was having this conversation on an IG Live yesterday about how, the fitness community is such a very small niche compared to the entire population. Like, I mean, you just go to a family get together this holiday season and you start talking to family members about macros and training and most of them have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
But like in our own little world, we think it's like everybody's involved with this. Everybody knows how to track macros. Everybody knows about training and progressive overload, and it's just not the case. So, but one of the things I wanted to bring you on here and talk to you about is it's been very interesting seeing your transition. If you guys don't know much about Tony, first of all, go follow him. But he has been a very very good strength athlete for a long time. Competed in powerlifting. Also former Marine. Well, actually, you're never a former Marine.
Right. They always correct you when you say that.
Yep, I know. I'm an Army guy. I forget about that sometimes. But yes, Marine veteran. So thank you for your service. But Tony has been involved in strength coaching, competing, everything for so long. You're still involved with Elite FTS, aren't you?
Yeah, still a coach and a columnist for them when I have the time to. But yeah, still do a lot of stuff with them.
So definitely go check out his stuff. But over the last, I guess from what I can recall, maybe 6 months, a little bit longer.
Yeah, this year. I would say this year. He's
been transitioning a lot over to more endurance-based training, but still leaving the weight training in there and stuff too as well. And I was talking to him a few weeks ago how I'm planning on doing the Florida Ironman in November of 2022. And it's just been really interesting seeing your transition into more endurance-based activities. I think you just got done doing a duathlon.
Yep. I did an Olympic sized duathlon because I can swim, but I cannot swim for longer than 50 meters without feeling like I'm going to die.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, that's going to be my hardest part too for this Ironman. But so for people that don't know that, it's biking and running. What were the distances that you did?
So it was a 1 mile run followed by a 25-mile bike, followed by a 10K 6.2 mile run.
Oh, okay. I don't think I realized about the 1 mile run beforehand. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's how they do them, right? So every duathlon will start with a run first. I think they have like a 70.3-ish type duathlons where I think that one is like a 3 to 6 mile run first, and then like a 70-mile bike, and then a 10-mile run at the end. But yeah, that always starts with a run.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So first of all, before we start getting into like the training and all that stuff, what made you want to get into endurance stuff? You are a very big muscular man, right?
Well, thank you.
You've worked really hard to build a good muscular base, strength, muscle hypertrophy. What made you want to get into starting to go the endurance route?
Yeah, so I lived in Oregon before moving to Florida, and I started to do a lot of hiking there and experiencing nature and kind of that freedom that nature can bring to you, and the idea of you see things a little bit differently when you're on your feet and you're doing things and you're traveling, as opposed to if you're in a car or other facets of travel. So being able to think about at the end of my strength training career of, what's next, what would be the next challenge, right? Because I do find myself in a very easy, comfortable life that I've built. So it's like, how can I create a little bit of adversity, a little bit of self-imposed suffering? Because if you look at the research and you just talk to people, that can build a lot of character, that can build a higher quality of life, and that can build a longer life as well. So transitioning from trying to be the absolute strongest person I could be to trying to live the healthiest and longest life, but also challenging myself, right? And seeing what my body's capable of, more so what my mind's capable of as well, right? Being in the military and going through the training and going overseas and fighting, you understand that everyone's built a little bit differently mentally. You can have some of the guys who are in the best shape and they'll fall off and quit. And you have some guys who just grit through it and continue to push and persevere. And I wanted to explore those boundaries as much as I could. And I couldn't think of a better endeavor to do that than some type of endurance-based performance, something that I'm just, one, not necessarily built for, and two, that I just haven't done or explored. And so getting into that, understanding that was the reason behind it, the struggles of the first 6 months of getting into things and not being able to really explore like I want to, was tough to get through. But now that I'm at that point where, you know, I can run 8 to 14 to 20 miles, no problem. I'm able to like go places that I've never thought I could go, and do things that I never thought I could do. And it's like, well, what's next? What are the possibilities? And it's just been fun to explore that.
Absolutely. You know, that mental challenge, I think, is a huge component. I find a lot of people, and I know this is one of the things that's driving me towards Ironman, and eventually, like, I want to do an ultra. Like, I want to, like, every year I plan on having a different, you know, boundary pushing event that I want to keep going for. I just got to get my body healthy first. But I find a lot of people, as far as, you know, coming out of the military, we look and we are searching for that next challenge, because every day, you know, maybe not so much when you're stateside, but when you're deployed, definitely every day is a new challenge. It's a new mission. It's a new test in a way for you, physically and mentally. And I know that it's something I've been searching for a lot when I came back and got out and everything like that. But I find that, you know, a lot of people, former military, are the ones that are doing these, I don't want to call them crazy events, because they're not crazy, but to the average person, it seems crazy. Ultra marathons, 100, 200 mile races, triathlons, Ironmans, you know, things like this. We're driven. Like, we have this thing in us that just will not let us stand for mediocrity, I guess, or stand still. Like, we always have to keep pushing forward. So when I saw you starting to train for that, it didn't surprise me. I'm sorry, it didn't shock me, but it kind of surprised me that that was a route that you went, just because I know you so much from a strength perspective and from a muscle building perspective. But I love that you're doing that, and I love that you're documenting that too, and you're showing that on your Instagram and things like that, which, by the way, guys, I'll leave all his links below. You know, if you guys are listening on podcast or watching on YouTube, you can go check him out. But that's been really, really interesting to see you develop in that, because, you know, maybe you're not necessarily built for running, but it's showing people that, listen, you might not fit into this stereotypical mold of a runner or a swimmer or a biker or whatever. It doesn't mean you can't still go for it and have fun. And there's not stuff that you can still learn along the way about yourself. I mean, what are some of the things, as far as getting into the endurance training and pushing yourself? What are some things that you've learned, good or bad, about yourself that maybe you didn't discover through weight training?
Yeah, I mean, good points, man. For like, it's one of those things where, you know, when I was lifting weights, I was relatively good at it right away. And there was this idea of like, can I be the best in the world at it? And that's a whole different beast to try to like bite off in and of itself. And then getting into like the endurance type stuff, there's no drive to be the best in the world at it. There's a drive to like see what I can overcome, you know. And that's one of the things that I've learned is like, when your body starts to hurt, when your brain starts to tell you like, you know, this is not going the way you want it to, can you push through that? Can you persevere? And it's amazing that by pushing through another 5 minutes, all of a sudden your body feels great and you hit that rhythm and you hit that groove. And it's like, man, if I can just extrapolate that little bit of perseverance and put it into my everyday life, how much more successful will I be? How much more driven will I be in everything else that I do? So that it allows you to push past those boundaries. And that's kind of the reason why I wanted to do it. Not so much to break records or be the best like I did in powerlifting, but it's more so like, when I hit a certain mile, when I want to quit, do I quit or do I keep going? Right. And like, how do I differentiate myself? And it's like perseverance, that grit, that determination. And one of the biggest things that I love about the endurance stuff, whether it be cycling or running, is every day you can run the same path every single day, but it can look completely different based on who you are that day and how you wake up and how you view the world. And for me, being able to run, being able to bike allows me to see the world in such a different view. Mm-hmm. Right? The beauty of things, the simplicity of things. When you run past a tree, you know, 100 times, you'll start to see new things every time, right? And I think that nuance brings such a beauty to life of like exploration and, you know, everyone gets on this hedonic treadmill and they're trying to find greater and better things to do in their life instead of just being present within the moment and trying to just enjoy that and see how that feels, see how that minute feels. Oh, it feels good. Well, let's do 2 minutes. Oh, that minute felt like crap. Well, what does 4 minutes? And then it's just like that moment to moment exuberance of like life and beauty. And that's one of the biggest things that I've learned so far within the endurance stuff is like that self-exploration that you get, that the beauty that you see in life is so much more vibrant when you're out there doing those type of things.
Yeah, the places you'll go to and visit on foot are unlike anywhere else or any other thing that can take you anywhere. Because every step, I mean, like you just said it, like 1 minute could feel good, next minute could feel like crap. The next 10 minutes after that could just be bliss. Like you could just be in this euphoria. Like it's a lot different than weight training because there is going to be this point of muscle fatigue in weight training. You just absolutely cannot push that bar anymore. Right. Well, of course, there's going to be that with running too. I mean, but you're going to find that much later on, and you're going to find that your mind can overcome those obstacles so much greater than it can in weight training. Your mind can't overcome the fact that you have zero glycogen left in your muscles, or
right.
You have no, like, you can push to a certain extent, but you are going to fail at some time, at some point. The only time you really fail with endurance training is if you just give up. Right. Because there's always something that we can find and unlock in our mind and unlock in our training programming and just the outlook that we have going into the day that can push us through further and further. And, you know, it's been a few months since I've been able to run because I'm dealing with this hamstring and glute injury and stuff, which hopefully by January 1, I'll be ready to start running again. But
that's awesome.
You know, I'm looking forward to getting back in that because I don't feel as challenged in my everyday life as I do when I'm performing an athletic event, especially endurance training, right? You can build a business, you can do all this stuff, and it's great. It doesn't really help you figure out who you are more than being in those situations where you feel dead. You don't want to keep going, but you have to dig deep in order to keep going. Or you stop and you give up and you learn a lot about yourself then too, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, even just being by yourself, right? Even just being in your own head for 60 minutes. We try to be inundated with so many things to keep ourselves busy because we don't want to be bored, especially if you're an entrepreneur. You don't want to feel like you're ever being bored because then you feel like you're not productive. But getting out there and just being in your own head for an hour, 2 hours, running without your headphones on, you know, you just have a bottle of water and you're just out there and you're just talking to yourself. And like, that's some magical stuff right there in and of itself, right?
Do you run with headphones? Do you listen to music when you run or bike or anything?
So sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I never listen to music. I always listen to like a podcast or an audiobook or something along those lines. But yeah, sometimes it's just go out there and just run and you just listen to the water and you just listen to nature, right? Especially first thing in the morning. I love running as the sun's coming up because there's no traffic. You can just hear everything and it's very, very beautiful. But if it's like a high voluminous area that I'm running in with a lot of chatter and cars and whatever, I'll probably put headphones on just to like block that out a little bit. So it just depends.
I'm a morning runner too. There's something about just going out when it's dark and coming back when the sun's coming up. Like it just realizes me. It's kind of weird. It almost makes me feel like I don't know how to say this without making it sound like superiority over anybody. Everybody else is still sleeping and I'm getting work done. Right. And as coming up and they're getting up, I'm already far ahead in my day. Right. Like I've already accomplished something. You know, the first thing, and this goes back to, and I'm blanking on the guy's name, Admiral, I can't remember his name. Anyways, talking about how making your bed in the morning is the first productive thing you first accomplish it. Now I've always made my bed, but you know, I heard his speech and all that about it a few years back, and it really makes sense. To me, the next most productive thing you can do is move your body, and it helps me get my mind going for the day. I'm so much more productive. I'm so much more positive. I feel healthier. Things work so much better when I get up and move my body in the morning. And so it's cool to hear you're a morning runner too. Some people, they're like, yeah, high noon, I'll go out high noon, I'll go out at night. Yeah, I used to run at night a little bit. I mean, years and years
Yeah.
ago, but there's just nothing like getting up in the morning, going for that run or bike or whatever it is you want to do, and just setting the tone for the day. But when you
Yeah.
find like you're hitting that rough spot, whether it be, it's a little bit harder to hit it on a bike, but when you're running and you're in that, you're coming up to that roadblock and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can keep pushing through it. Do you have sort of any little games you play with yourself in order to help you keep going? Like, for example, me, I'll look ahead at something that's maybe just even 2 or 3 mailboxes ahead. And I'm just like, I'm just going to run to that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you accomplish that and you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. I'm going to run a couple more. Right. So I start playing games like that. Do you have any tips or techniques or anything that you use?
Yeah. So first I'll kind of like assess the situation, right? I'll see what's going on. Like what's making this run hard? Is it my calves are cramping up? Is it my legs feel heavy? Is it I have a hard time breathing? And I'll just try to assess the situation. Like, is it a fueling thing? Do I need more fuel? Is it a recovery thing? Did I come out too hard? Do I need to slow my pace? So I'll try to like troubleshoot it first to figure out what exactly is going on. And if it's something that I can push through, or if it's something that's going to be there the entire time. Do I gauge like, is it getting worse? Is it getting better? If it's not getting worse, but it's not getting better, then that's a mental thing. Just keep pushing. A lot of times it does get better and it works itself out. When it comes to like those other instances of like, man, you start like clock watching, like, okay, I'm at a mile. And then, oh man, I'm at a mile and a half. I thought I would be at 2 by now. I start trying to find those landmarks or people, and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to, if I can just get to this light, then I'll take a drink of water or I'll take a drink of my electrolytes. And then the next thing you know, it's like, I got to that light. And then it's like, okay, I know if I just turn this corner, I'm halfway there, I'm home stretch. And then, so it's a lot of internal, a lot of positive type of dialogue. I never try to down talk myself. I'd never try to have negative self-talk of like, you're a quitter, you can't be doing this and things along that nature. I try to think of a lot more positive things. And being able to push through on more of a positive note. Like if you look at the research and things of that nature, it shows that your rate of perceived effort is one of the biggest drivers of you quitting, right? So how can you lower that perceived effort? And a lot of times it's visualization of happy things, of smiling, right? If you smile while you run, that's going to release a little bit more endorphin so you can keep going. If you think positive, like have these power mantras, things like that, that can help get you into that rhythm of continuing to push and have that perceived effort start to lower. But when you start to have that negative self-talk of like, you're a quitter, you will always be a quitter, don't quit this time, that type of thing, that some people do have, like the David Goggins of the world have that mentality and it works for him. And that's great. It just doesn't seem like that's not why I run. I don't run to escape demons in my head. I run to almost to just appreciate the life that I have, right? Like you say, you run first thing in the morning because it allows you to get a step ahead of everyone, right? And that's a good mental boost and clarity. For me, I like to run first thing in the morning because as that sun's coming up, it makes me think about the guys who are no longer with us that don't get to see that sunrise, right? And how lucky I am to be out there. And if I can just focus on those things of luck, of life, of beauty, then that seems to help me push through. And then next thing I know, it's like 20 minutes have gone by and I'm like, oh, okay, I feel really good now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what you just said there, it kind of brings up an interesting point. We hear so many people, especially when it comes to running, right? They're like, oh, running sucks. I hate it. Like, you couldn't pay me to run. All right. When in reality, it's like running is such a euphoric, it's such a, in a way, kind of a spiritual thing because it is just you. Like, if you want to stop, you stop, right? But if you push through it and everything, no one's forcing you to do it. No one's forcing you to do any of that, getting out there in the morning or running, 5 miles, 10 miles, whatever you want to do. But you can learn so much about yourself and, saying things like, oh, it sucks, I could never be a runner, right? All this stuff. You are kind of doing a disservice to people, kind of like you said, who either aren't here or don't have the ability to work out. Working out is not a punishment. It's a privilege that you have. It is an absolute gift because listen, I've had different stretches in the last few years where I haven't been able to train for a while. I'm in one right now. And I can tell you that I appreciate training so much more when it's taken away from me. But
Yeah.
Don't ever go into something saying like, oh, I hate this or I hate that, because you're just reinforcing that the negative that doesn't need to be there. There's nothing negative about working out, right? There's nothing negative about, maybe it takes you a little bit longer to get to your goals. Who cares, right? It's about your personal journey along the way and stuff. But, as far as the transition for you, how did you, because obviously you weren't doing much endurance stuff at all during the strength training
No.
part. How did you handle that transition at the beginning? I mean,
very slowly.
I was going to say, I know you, and I know you didn't just jump in full bore into it, but I do know a lot of people that would. They'd be like,
right.
Oh, cutting off, I'm going all in. Like, I'm going to run 10 miles today.
Yeah.
Way to go about it. Now, I know that you are kind of using the Mathas method for your heart rate and stuff. I know a good deal about it. I don't think I know as much about it as you do. So you can kind of talk a little bit about that if you want. But how did you kind of make that transition from the strength world into endurance? And how do you still keep strength training in your regimen and stuff?
Yeah. So what I did was like, looking at the research and stuff, you try to think about like, how is the best way to introduce endurance type stuff so that your body can acclimate? Because the thing that deteriorates people from wanting to continue to do it is injury, or it doesn't feel good. So I tried to make it in a state where like, okay, I can push myself and get something out of it and still feel good and not get injured. So I originally started with bike riding, right? Because there's no weight bearing to it. You can build up your aerobic base by doing it, and you can start to get those legs moving and start to do some type of aerobic capacity building there. And then when it came to running, I really much did like the fartlek type runs where it was like, okay, I'm going to do 20 minutes today, right? And I'm going to walk for 3 minutes and jog for 10 seconds, right? And then the next time I come out, it's like, I'm going to stay at that 20-minute time domain because I feel good there. I feel like I'm recovered there. My body doesn't hurt. My knees don't hurt. But then I'm going to start to reduce that to 2.5 minutes and then jog for 30 seconds. Yeah. And then after 2 months of doing that, I got to the point where it's like, okay, I can jog for a full 30 minutes now and be fine and not feel like overtrained, and I can recover, all while still doing the bike riding as well. And that's the bike riding was the ones where I can like really push that aerobic base. I can do sprints on the bike. I can do like hills on the bike and all this stuff, and it doesn't beat me up. Whereas running, it would deteriorate very, very fast. So I built up that aerobic foundation with the running through fartleks over like 2 months until I could finally feel like I can run for 30 minutes and be fine and be comfortable with it. And then the bike, I was able to push and train that pretty hard because there is no weight bearing to it. So the risk of injury is so much lower. So that was the way I transitioned into it. And that took like 2 to 3 months to like start feeling really good. So I just did very, very slow. Could I have started off and ran 3 miles? Sure. But it would have sucked. And if you look at the research, right, like our perception of how workouts feel will determine our fatigue thresholds and if we want to continue to do it, right? If you look at goal setting and research on those type of things, right? If we set something out that feels too hard from the very beginning, then it deters us from wanting to continue to persevere and push through it. So it's like easy, small goals, right? Like I can add 10 seconds to my jog and take 30 seconds away from my walk. And, and every day was like a win. So it felt good. When I'm introducing new things with myself or with clients, it's always like small wins first, and that's going to build to bigger wins. I don't want to ever put a client on a program where it's like, I can't handle this. And then we're constantly regressing. Imagine as a client or as an athlete, like you're always regressing because you can't do what someone's telling you to do. You start to feel like a failure. You start to feel like, right, maybe this isn't the sport for me. Maybe I should just try something different, right? And it's easy to talk to yourself that way when things are harder than you would expect them to be.
Well, how you get introduced to anything is going to determine,
Yeah.
your level of effort, your passion, your consistency, anything. I mean, like when you first were introduced to weight training, if you had someone in there that made it hell for you and you didn't enjoy it, or they put too much weight on the bar and you failed and you got injured right away, you would never have kept up with it.
No.
Well, I wouldn't have, right?
Right.
And I probably did add a little too much weight to the bar at first, but I still enjoyed it. But yes, how you introduce someone, I agree with you. With my clients, we always start with, I don't really even, unless you're someone who's coming to me and I know you have a very, very long background in weight training and you're not a beginner, you're not advanced, you're kind of in that intermediate area. We always start with a very small progression upwards because you never really know, right? But you were your own test subject. You knew your
Yeah.
ability, you knew your level of fitness, and I think that's great that you started that way. As far as, did you experience any injuries at the beginning when you started running? Because I know that a lot of people that aren't used to running, they might pull a calf or a hamstring or have a hip issue or something. Did you experience any of that, or were you pretty good because of how you conditioned yourself into it?
Yeah, I was pretty good. I was dealing with a little bit of an adductor strain from Jiu Jitsu and just kind of dealing with that. And I went to a couple running stores and had my gait analyzed, and they saw that as I was striking on my right foot, right, my ankle would start to cave in, which would cause a lot of torque on my tibia into my femur. So that was causing my adductor to have to stabilize every step, right? So you can imagine, you do a 5 mile run, that's like 10,000 steps with the right leg. So that's a lot of strain on the adductor. So I got the proper shoes, I fixed my gait, and then I got an insole to help with that heel collapse, or that, not the heel collapse, but the arch collapse that was causing my right ankle to flex in. So once I got rid of that and fixed that, then the adductor was fine. It was easy to control, and ever since then, it's just kind of like volume management, right? So if my knees start to feel beat up, instead of running that day, I'll get on the bike, right? Because the bike, so it's nice to have those cross training things, to not be so fixated on I have to run today, but understanding that there's other means to get the job done, right? If you're just training your aerobic system, there's a million ways to train your aerobic system. Do it in a way that's not going to bang you up, and that's not going to force you to not be able to train for a couple of weeks because you push things too hard. But as of right now, I haven't had any serious run-in injuries or run-in traumas that have kept me from being able to participate on a weekly basis.
That's great. And that's kind of a good transition into this, the Mathotone method, and how that, controlling your heart rate and starting at a little bit slower of a pace and doing all that really helps. And, I was listening to a podcast that Nick Bear did a little while ago, talking about like, how do you run faster? Well, you actually got to run slower at first. And it's kind of this whole Mathotone method. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that for the people that aren't familiar with it, and how they can go about implementing that into their own training?
Yeah, definitely. So Dr. Phil Maffetone, he's a researcher, scientist, and he came up with this method of kind of just being able to control your heart rate to hit that kind of zone 2, where you're building mitochondrial density, mitochondrial power, and you're building a lot more of that aerobic capacity, right? Because most of the time you don't need to tap into anaerobic thresholds or anything along that nature when you're doing endurance type stuff. But we as athletes, we think like, if we're not breathing heavy, then it's not a good training session, right? So
Well,
what we've
in the military, if they told us to go out for a run, we're trying to run as fast as we can. And
every time, yeah, always setting PRs, right? So the idea with the Maffetone method is to build that aerobic capacity through zone 2 training. And it's very simple. It's just 180 minus your age. And that kind of sets you up to where that's where that max heart rate is. You want to be under that at all times. If you don't do heart rate training, a great way to think of it is just being able to have a conversation or do nasal breathing while you run. And that'll kind of gauge that kind of speed that you want to be at. And all that does is just allow you to build that big foundation of aerobic capacity without any type of overtraining. And it gives you barometers to do that in. So a lot of his method is, we're going to stay at this heart rate and below it, but we're going to run for time. We're not going to run for distance so much. We're going to run for an hour, right? And then you stay within that hour domain and you stay at that heart rate, and you'll notice like 3 weeks later, oh, I'm able to run a little bit faster at the same heart rate at the same time domain, right? My 10-minute miles are now 9:30 and then 9:15. And then, so it's just the idea that you can push yourself in that same intensity threshold and improve and improve and improve. because you're building mitochondria density, you're building an aerobic base, and that's the main purpose, right? Not to test, but to build.
It might feel like at first, like you're almost walking, right?
Yeah. For some people, for sure.
Of what a certain heart rate might be like. But when you're actually, like I wear the Garmin Phoenix 6. That's
yeah, me too. I got the same one.
Phoenix 6, yeah. When you actually like you're tracking your heart rate and you're seeing like what kind of effort you're giving at a certain heart rate, at first it may be a little bit disappointing.
Very much so.
Like, what? Like I'm in good shape, right? But running is a whole different beast. It's a whole different type of shape. But like Tony said, like as you progress, you're going to be able to get a little bit faster while being in that same heart rate zone. And a lot of people know the maximal heart rate equation, 220 minus your age, right? Well, Maffetone uses this because we want to take your top aerobic heart rate zone, which is completely different than your max, right?
Right.
Where you were talking a little bit about earlier, like you don't want to tap into that anaerobic that zone. Like now that doesn't mean that you don't do still some sprinting and things like that in your training at the appropriate time and with the appropriate volume in it and stuff. I actually I made a post about this, I think last month or whatever. They looked at like the top endurance athletes, like marathon runners and stuff like that. And most of them are Kenyan. They're from Kenya, right? The majority of the time, I think it was like 80 to 85% of the time they spent in this zone 2 training. They spent very little time in this, what most of us would consider normal training zone, where we're huffing and puffing the whole time, right? And it just goes to show that sometimes you got to get a little bit slower in order to get faster. And this is where the whole training smarter, not harder comes into play, because running is, and I kind of joke because you said earlier, and you weren't built for running. And that's what a lot of people think, but we're human. We are built for running. We just have to find what gait works for us, what speed works for us, and train it in the right method and stuff like this. And so I'm going to be using this method when I start up my endurance training and stuff as well in January. But how do you balance this endurance lifestyle now with your weight training? I'm sure probably gaining maximal strength right now is not at the top of your list. Maybe it is. But how do you go about balancing the two? Because anytime you make a choice to do something, something's going to have to be taken away, right? But it doesn't mean that you can't still make gains doing endurance type stuff with weight training. But talk a little bit about that, and then like how do you balance your nutrition with all that?
Yeah. So it depends on where you're at in the spectrum of what you're trying to do, right? So for me, being 240 pounds doesn't necessarily lend myself to being able to do ultra races that I want to do, right? So going to the gym and thinking about doing higher volume type training to put on muscle isn't going to be appropriate. If you look at the research too, right? Like the more muscle you have, the more inefficient you're going to be at aerobic and endurance-based stuff. So you don't really need muscle. You need strength for sure, right? The stronger you are, the more efficient your power output's going to be, the more efficient, the less strain you're going to be putting on your body, because you do have that strength, but it only needs to be at a certain maintenance level for you to be there. So I think about it in terms of, well, I'm getting all my volume is coming from the endurance stuff, right? I'm doing anywhere between 35 to 50 miles a week of running, anywhere between 25 to 50 miles a week of biking right now, and then jiu-jitsu here and there, right? So it's like, that's volume. I don't need to go to the gym to do any more volume. So what I do is try to think about where's my base maintenance strength at, and try to stay within that parameter for as long as I can. And that's going to allow me to stay strong. It's going to allow me to train everything that I need to train, right? I do a lot of more bilateral training because everything we do running is unilateral. So I don't need to really do too much there. I don't have a bilateral deficiency. So if I did, I could do some more unilateral stuff. But I feel like every time I do unilateral work, my legs feel kind of like jello the next day for running. So it's like that kind of defeats the purpose. So, I found that if I can keep a 455 to 500 pound squat, a 600 pound deadlift, and a 365 to 405 bench press, when I go to the gym, then I know that my volume is adequate and I'm doing just the right amount, right? And then I'll hit those base maintenance levels of like a top single for the day. Then I'll do some back off work of, doubles or triples. Like I said, I'm not trying to accrue any type of volume whatsoever. And then I'll work on like little niggles, doing exercises to keep my knees healthy, to keep my adductors healthy, to keep my core healthy, to keep my rear delts and rotator cuffs healthy. And I'll just pick like 1 or 2 exercises and do 2 to 3 sets of very low intensity, just kind of going through the motions, things like TKEs, Peterson step ups, face pulls, stuff like that, Copenhagen planks. But I'll be in and out of the gym in an hour. Maybe I'll do 3 working sets, full body. And I'll do that 2 to 3 times a week. And I feel like that for me is the sweet spot of what I can do and what I'm capable of to maintain. Because I think, like I said, I think strength is the most important thing when it comes to weight training for endurance athletes. Strength and any type of inefficiencies within deficits within muscle groups, right? Mm-hmm. Those should be the 2 main things. I don't understand and I don't see why you would ever want to do endurance weight training or hypertrophy weight training if you're an endurance athlete. To me, that just defeats the purpose of trying to be a good endurance athlete. Now, if you just want to do it because you feel good, then that's fine, right? But
yeah,
right. But understand, like, your walking lunges are very much in parallel to you jogging. So if you're doing 3 sets of 12 walking lunges, you may have to take 10 miles off your weekly run. And that's just something you're gonna have to figure out. You're gonna have to compromise those things, right? And it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish, what your goals are for the weight training. My weight training is to complement the endurance stuff right now. It's not to build, because there's not going to be an endurance athlete that's going to be strong. I don't need to build anything. I spent 15 years trying to build stuff,
right, exactly.
So it's like, well, I don't need to do that anymore.
I think that's a really smart point that you brought up about thinking about the movements that you are incorporating, like for lunges, for example. Like, you're already doing so much of that type of movement. Let's focus on things that are going to support that movement instead, right? Not actually go through the movement. Adductor work, knee work, glute med, stuff like that is really important. So have you learned, well, I know you've learned, how have you kind of tweaked your nutrition, if you have at all, doing more endurance type stuff? And especially like during your race, what did you learn about intra-race nutrition?
Yeah. So that's I'll play with it here and there, because I try to be as metabolically flexible as possible. That way I don't tap into like glycogen substrates right away when I am doing my endurance stuff. So if I know that I'm doing like a longer, easier pace type run first thing in the morning, I'll do that fasted with some amino acids. Because if you look at some of the literature, amino acids and electrolytes, if you look at some of the literature, the amino acid profile, the aminos going through your body is a way to kind of fight off fatigue in a fasted state. So to me, that's helped keeping more fat oxidation, but also not breaking down and creating more fatigue than I need to. Right. So I'll do that like 2 to 3 times a week to make sure that I have some good fat oxidation, some good fat utilization. And then when I go into like my harder, longer runs or bike rides, I'll focus on trying to have a well-balanced breakfast and then going on the ride. And within that ride, I'll do electrolytes, and I'll try to get in anywhere between like 50 to 70 grams of carbs per hour. If you look at the research, that's kind of that sweet spot of where you want to be. Depending on how big you are, will depend on how many more calories you need and things along those lines. Depending on if you're running trails as opposed to flat is going to determine how many calories you need. Depends on the workout, right? The higher the intensity, the more carbohydrates, the more calories you're going to need, but the longer the duration, finding what actually sits well within your stomach is like the next thing, right? Science can tell you want between 50 to 100 grams of carbs, but if your stomach's like, I don't want any of that shit, then you got to figure out like, well, what can I have, right? Because you got to have some type of fuel, especially if you start to get into that ultra endurance stuff where you're out there for 8 to 10 to 12 hours, right? You got to find something that fits well. So on those really longer rides, I'll try to play around with nutrition as much as possible. level to try to figure out what works best for me. And kind of that sweet spot of like some cyclic dextrins and then another carb mix of carb 10 or waxy maize or something along those lines, right? If you look at the research, more than one carb source allows for better GI function. It doesn't cause as much GI distress, where if you have one carb, you start to reach that intestinal like absorption rate at like 50 grams. If you start to incorporate multiple different carbohydrates, it's up to 70, 80 with less GI distress. So I try to focus on that type of stuff, and just seeing where my stomach is at is the most important thing. Because that's one of the biggest things that deters people from being able to finish is like GI distress. You're either puking or you're shitting yourself, and then you can't eat, and then your body's like, I'm done, man. We've had enough of this, right? And that's one of the main basis of fatigue is nutrition and supplementation and stuff like that.
Obviously I've been just watching so much stuff on Ironmans and triathlons lately and everything. Everybody says that the fourth discipline of a triathlon is nutrition. That will make or break you 100%. And, understanding your sweat rate during certain events, like during the run during the run, it's going to be different than your sweat rate during the bike. Right.
Yeah.
And, so understanding all that and, just being able to find what works for you. I think that's great, because, it might not even be the number of carbs that's the issue for you, or number of calories. It might just be the form or the source that you're taking in.
Exactly.
I watch some of the stuff on ultra runners. They're eating burgers during it. They're having, pancakes and waffles and fries at their rest stop. They're eating chips and all that stuff. I don't know if I could do that, but never ran an ultra yet, so I don't know. But some people just can only have liquids during it.
Right. Some of them stay with gels and liquids. Some of them go with Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is crazy to think about. But it's.
Could you imagine coming into mile 62 or whatever, and you got a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken there?
No.
Jeez.
Yeah, it wouldn't feel good. It doesn't feel good now when I don't do anything, let alone if I'm trying to run. But you have to find what works for you. Don't introduce new things. You touched on hydration and electrolytes, which is really important. And a good way to find that out, right? It's like, weigh yourself before you start your activities, weigh yourself after. And that's going to tell you, this is how much hydration I need. There are salt tests you can do where you can test to see how much sodium you've lost throughout that. And those are fairly cheap and easy to figure out. And that'll tell you like, okay, if I run at noon, I'm going to sweat this much and I'm going to drop this much, as opposed to if I run in the morning, right? Yeah. Some endurance races start at 10 o'clock at night. Some start at, 8 in the morning. Some are 100 degrees, some are 30 degrees, right? And you have to play around with those variables to figure it out, right? Like if I know if I have a hot race coming up, I'll go into my sauna to do heat acclimatization, right? And try to see what liquids I can take down in that sauna when it's brutally hot and my stomach's like, no, we're not having any of it. And those are the things you just have to think about, right? But you don't want to overthink it either, right? If you just go with a simple electrolyte and water, you'll be fine most of the time as you're starting out. And then just eat to one thing to think about as you're starting out in this endeavor is like, as you start to add new things, your hunger signals are going to be higher and higher. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to eat more. That just means that your body has this disproportionate outlook of like, we're doing more, so therefore I think we need to eat more. So my hunger signals are going to be so much higher. And you have a lot of people when you introduce this type of stuff, they can't stick to their diet because they're just hungry all the time. It's like, you got to push through. Yeah, you got to push through that. If you're not losing weight, you're recovered, right? You're good. If you're losing 5 pounds a day, then you need to add a little bit more nutrition in, but hunger is always going to be there. The more you do, the hungrier you're going to get.
And a lot of it's mental too.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I'm doing more. So I must be hungry now, right?
Right.
Your body has a lot of stored energy in body fat.
Yeah.
Even if you're a pretty lean individual, you still have a lot of stored energy. But so, kind of to wrap all this up, what's next for you? Like, what's your, granted, we know that the PhD program's coming up, but in terms of like athletic events and challenges, do you have anything on the horizon?
Yeah, so I am doing a marathon at the end of January, and then in April.
Disney one?
No, the thing's sold out so fast. I'm doing the one in Clearwater.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So there'll be 4 bridges on it, which is fun. And it's a loop, so it's not like a bunch of laps. It's just one big long trek. And then in April, the goal is to do a 50-mile trail run out in Croom, which is up north, just like an hour north of Tampa. It's a 16-mile loop, and you just do it 3 times. And
okay.
yeah, and that puts you
man,
right at like 50.
I wish I would be in shape to do the marathon at the end of January with you, but I can't wait to, get healthy, get going, and start doing some endurance training with you this spring. So
yeah, man, that'd be great.
Yeah. So where can people find you? I'm going to leave all this stuff below, but anything you want to plug, anything like that, go for it.
Yeah, so obviously, if you see up here, Subject Zero Supplements, that's my supplement company, and we have a lot of carbohydrate, electrolyte powders, things along those lines that can help you during your training. We also have a lot of health supplements. We have a joint supplement that we just came out with that helps with anti-inflammation and recovery and things along that nature. So check those out. If you're interested in coaching, we have coachescorneru.com, which is an educational service. And then I also have teamphoenixperformance.net, which is my coaching service for nutrition and training. And then Tony Montgomery Jr. on Instagram and Elite FTS, if you guys are interested in any type of articles or coaching blogs or anything like that.
Yeah, guys, definitely go follow Tony. Wealth of knowledge, and just thank you so much for coming on, man.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
We could probably talk for hours and hours, but we'll have you on again another time, and maybe we'll have you on after the marathon, see how that went.
Yeah, let me actually do something that's beyond a marathon so I can call myself an endurance athlete. I feel like such a fraud right now talking about this stuff, but
hey, no, a duathlon is no joke, man. You're an endurance athlete now. maybe we'll wait till after the 50-miler and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, maybe I'll be like super optimistic after the marathon. Then after the 50-mile, I'm like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and be killing myself. So yeah.
Anything you put your mind to, man, I see you succeed at. And I wish you well with your last semester coming up, and whatever lucky institution you land at for your PhD. I know you're going to do some great things, and I just look forward to continuing to follow your journey, stay in touch, and just get to training here pretty soon. So thanks again for your time, man. You guys, I want to tell you guys, thank you for listening. You guys are great. The podcast is getting a lot of downloads lately, which is awesome. So keep sharing that. You can find this if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify. You can go watch this on YouTube. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go listen to it on iTunes and Spotify. And Tony, we'll be catching up with you soon. All right.
Yes, sir, man. Have a great day.